Hello, this is Lisa Satterly, and thank you for watching my older adult video presentation for human behavior in the social environment. So, I interviewed one of my family members, and we are going to call her AJ. A little bit of background about AJ. AJ is 73 years old, and she lives in Georgia. She completed 3 bachelor's degrees in her lifetime, which was a sense of pride for her. She also had an interesting story about her adoption. She was adopted as part of a Butterbox baby scandal in Canada. This is where an orphanage had placed children together and touted them as siblings and gave them to rich Jewish families in America. The unfortunate part was when a child was undesirable or had a health condition, the adoption agency would feed them syrup until they passed away and then buried them out in the back in little butter boxes. And this was the shame of Canada. It also played a significant role in AJ's identity and her trajectory for the rest of her life, as we'll find out later. AJ was diagnosed with borderline personality disorder, which was also significant as an adolescent and might explain some of her behavior and her identity concerns. So for this presentation, I decided to look at Erickson's 5th stage of development, which is identity versus role confusion. And this age range is between approximately 12 to 18 years or so plus. And this is where adolescents try on different personas and hang out with different peers and try to find out who they are. It's just the beginning of their identity formation. They develop a sense of autonomy from what their parents' expectations are sometimes and try out things for themselves in the world. This is also where the adolescent creates their own ideologies and thought processes and what they believe in and worldviews and things that they have to consider. It also is a time of confusion where there's uncertainty. Where do I belong? Who am I going to be? What am I going to do for the rest of my life? So this is a long age range of development. So a little bit about AJ and some significant things in her life. Her grandmother passed away on Passover, which is a significant observed event in the Jewish community. And she loved her grandmother. She was the kindest person in AJ's life as an adolescent. She didn't develop a lot of friends, but she developed her first real friend during this time that accepted her for who she was because AJ thought she was a little bit of a geek and a bookworm. She found out during this time that her brother was adopted and she was adopted and her brother wasn't her twin. And I'll discuss that a little more later. She moved several times in Brooklyn where she grew up, and she moved to Montana. And this was important because she loved that time in Montana, and she found herself there. She also fell in love with her first boyfriend. He was kind to her and told her she was beautiful, and he was very important. She had her first sexual experience. And at the age of 16, she graduated high school and went to college in Cortland, New York to study education. She married at the age of 18, and she liked that because she was able to move out of her parents' home. But getting married wasn't necessarily her idea. She also said that she was proud of becoming a mother for the first time. That was very important to her. So, identity versus role confusion. So, there were some challenges in AJ's life during that time that she had to deal with. AJ grew up in a predominantly Jewish neighborhood. Her father was a chemist for the local college. She was able to identify with other Jewish families there, but they quickly moved out and went to Montana. And this was a challenge for her as far as her identity. her boyfriend that she fell in love with, her first boyfriend, he was not accepted because he was not Jewish. Being Jewish was important to her parents culturally and religiously. She did not fit in with peers. AJ says, I'm a geek. I'm a nerd. Nobody liked hanging out with me. She was an A student, and so she always said she was awkward. She had recently discovered that she was adopted. Her brother and her were called down to the principal's office in high school, and the principal called her a liar and a fraud because she filled out that she was an American citizen. Turns out she found out she was Canadian and that she was adopted, and her brother wasn't her twin because he had a different last name on his paperwork that they received. And she had to run home at that moment and confront her mother about what her identity is. And her mother pretty much told her that she was lucky that she was picked out because she was ugly and undesirable, and that she did the right thing by adopting her. So this was a significant part of her not being sure about her identity. She dealt with a lot of anxiety. Her father was a strict disciplinarian. He was very physical with his discipline, and her mother was not warm. In fact, her parents didn't even reside in the same room together at night. Uh, and with borderline personality, this, according to Frias, Palma, Friolis, Gonzalez, and Horta, in 2016, their study found a link between experienced childhood trauma, such as the one of her mother's verbal abuse and her father's physical discipline, and developing borderline personality disorder. So this might have had a significant role in her later developing borderline personality disorder because of the stress and anxiety she felt in her adolescence. Her strained relationship with her mother continued as her mother favored men and boys, and so her brother was favored and he got cars and things, even though she was an A student and he messed up a lot. Her mother always favored in making sure that she had to look out for her brother and take care of him, even though he messed up several times. But AJ had a lot of accomplishments, she felt. So some of her identity was found in the fact that she became an avid horseback rider. She cared for her first horse in Montana. She finally found a friendship in her adolescence year with her best friend Gabby. And Gabby accepted her for being a bookworm and somewhat odd. And she was able to confide in her. She was able to change her major at 17 to geology. And AJ said, I finally felt a sense of real accomplishment. This was a field that not many women went into. And at the end of the spectrum of Erickson's fifth stage, she had her first child. And she said being a mother was a major accomplishment for her. So some of the crisis in Erickson's fifth stage is identity confusion. So identity confusion is characterized by a sense of no life purpose. Identity confusion looks like poor connections with other. There's real no sense of belonging, as AJ experienced, where she didn't fit in her adolescence years with a lot of her peers, so she didn't get to try on different personas. She found one which she was good at, which was school. Mental health is contingent on that acceptance between peer groups and the social norms going on for that time. And so when you're not accepted by peers, this can really heavily strain your identity and knowing who you are, according to Erickson. A sense of autonomy is fostered by the acceptance of your parents. AJ had a strained relationship, especially with her mother. And in a study, most women identity and sense of autonomy is based on their parents' acceptance. And AJ didn't experience that. AJ was conflicted at being a wife versus continuing her career as a geologist. Her parents told her that she needed to get married. That was the first and foremost thing she should do at a very young age. Her identity was really challenged when she found out that she was adopted. She thought she was the natural born child and had a twin brother of her parents. AJ stated she felt like an outcast with her peers, and her mother favored her brother. So this contributed a lot to what Erickson called identity confusion. There was a lot going on in AJ's life, and these were considered turbulent years, according to her. So, some of the psychosocial crisis resolution and things that were going on as far as diversity, during that time, she was a female and she struggled to garner acceptance by her mother, which caused her a lot of anxiety. She had determination to enter a male-dominated education field in geology. She was the only female geology student at that time. Another role in diversity was that she was a child of immigrant parents, which religion and cultural norms conflicted with her identity. 1960s, she wanted to experiment and understand sexuality and date people that were not Jewish. So that challenged her identity. She was from a middle to upper class family, and so therefore she was afforded the opportunity to go to college, which seemed to help her form her identity. As far as oppression, there was gender norms culturally. As a Jewish adolescent in 1965, dictating becoming a wife and forego her education when she became married. And once again, geology was pervasively male-dominated field, and she felt some pressure there to perform, and sometimes ostracized in class, but she still went on. Through the multi systems lens in psychosocial crisis resolution, her family was about discipline, and they had traditional roles, and religious expectations were sometimes a barrier to her autonomy because of their expectations of being married. And if she was to go to college and finish it, she would have to become an educator and not a geologist. Institutions like her high school, they doubted her authenticity, her integrity. That was challenged, and that weighed on her identity. And during that time in 1965, the Vietnam War, their policies, the government's policy was that married draftees were not the first to be picked. So her mother, who when she found somebody who was Jewish, said that you needed to save him and marry him so that he wouldn't be the first to be drafted. So that changed her trajectory. Society was shifting during that time. About 48% of women were going and getting their bachelor's degree, but still in society, some believed in traditional roles that she should be just become a wife and a homemaker. All these factors intersected with her life, which helped her develop her sense of identity, as well as caused her some confusion about who she was. I don't believe that she really actually found her sense of identity during Erickson's age range. So I looked at Bronfenbrenner's ecological system theory. And according to his theory, the child's development is dependent on the interplay between themselves, the community, what's going on, their immediate environment, and the expanded environments, the institutions, and also as well as what was going on at the time, which was the Vietnam War and time of change for women. She was the daughter of a Jewish immigrant family, and because of that, she experienced two micro and mesosystems. The one that is her family's cultural identity and religious beliefs, and that her need to assimilate into American culture. Her peer helped her with assimilating and finding a sense of identity and exploring some typical things that were going on socially at that time. The macro system was the Vietnam War, which influenced her decision to immediately get married rather than exploring a relationship, whether she wanted to marry somebody Jewish. And her timeline was cut down to 2 years because she had to immediately marry somebody to save him from being drafted right away. Her mother was a strong influence in her environment, which is she was the one that paid for her schooling at that time. And so she influenced what she went to school for. So as you can see, there was a lot going on between the ages of 12 and 18 that happened in AJ's life. And there are some limitations to Erickson's theory. The theory is way too restrictive in the developmental stages. Identity can go well beyond the ages of 18, as in the case of AJ, that she didn't quite find out, according to her, who she was at 18. Things were developing, but there were still some things she needed to resolve. And so, as emergent adults feel like they don't find out who they are until well into their 20s. The theory is defined linearly when development stages can happen alongside of each other, or they can be revisited during the lifespan. Erickson's theory also doesn't look at women's identity development compared to men. It's mainly focused on men's identity and growth. And women tend to find their identity a little bit later in life. It also has a limitation in explaining diverse populations and their cultural beliefs or how they develop. And that is another limitation. The expectations for what is considered normal at the time evolves in society. As you know, that children that were going to school during that time of AJ, the expectations are much higher. And so it might take today, in today's world, which might take a little bit longer to find out who you are. You might not find your identity. So Erickson's theory doesn't take in the evolving societal norms. So I thank you for watching my presentation, and you learned a little bit more about AJ's life. It was turbulent, and she said she didn't find out who she was later in life. Take the time to look at my references, and I appreciate your time. Thank you.